Mamluk, Mameluke, meaning property or owned slave of the king, also transliterated as Mamluk, 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 Mameluke, Mameluke. Mameluke or Mameluke is an Arabic designation for slaves. More specifically, it refers to Khwarezmian dynasty in Persia, Mamluk dynasty, Man Luke Sultanate, Mamluk dynasty of Iraq. The most enduring Mamluk realm was the military caste in medieval Egypt that rose from the ranks of slave soldiers who were mainly of Kipchak, Turkic, Circassian, Georgian, and Coptic Egyptian. Many Mamluks could also be of Balkan origin. The Mamluk phenomenon, as David Ayalon dubbed the creation of the specific warrior class, was of great political importance and was extraordinarily long-lived, lasting from the 9th to the 19th centuries AD. Over time, Mamluks became a powerful military caste in various societies that were controlled by Muslim rulers, particularly in Egypt, but also in the Levant, Mesopotamia, and India. Mamluks held political and military power. In some cases, they attained the rank of sultan, while in others they held regional power as emirs or beys. Most notably, Mamluk factions seized the sultanate for themselves in Egypt and Syria in a period known as the Man Luke Sultanate. The Mamluk Sultanate famously beat back the troops of the Ilkhanate at the Battle of Ain Jalut and fought the Crusaders, effectively driving them out from the Levant and Egypt in 1213 to 1221 and 1154 to 1169, then officially in 1302 from the Levant, ending the era of the Crusades. While Mamluks were purchased, their status was above ordinary slaves, who were not allowed to carry weapons or perform certain tasks. In places such as Egypt from the Ayyubid dynasty to the time of Muhammad Ali of Egypt, Mamluks were considered to be true lords and true warriors, with social status above the general population in Egypt and the Levant. Overview. The origins of the Mamluk system are disputed. Historians agree that the story of an entrenched military caste like the Mamluks in Islamic societies begins with the Abbasid caliphs of the 9th century Baghdad. The question is more precisely when in the 9th century. The dominant view up to the 1990s was that the earliest Mamluks were known as Ghilman and were bought by the Abbasid caliphs, especially al-Mutazim. By the end of the 9th century, these slaves had become the dominant element in the military. Conflict between these Ghilman and the population of Baghdad prompted the Caliph al-Mutazim to move his capital to the city of Samarra. But this did not succeed in calming tensions. The Caliph al-Mutawakkil was assassinated by some of these slave soldiers in 861. A more recent interpretation would distinguish between a Ghilman system in Samarra, without training and relying on pre-existing Central Asian hierarchies, mixing adult slaves and freemen, and a later creation of an actual Mamluk system, with the systematic training of young slaves. After the return of the Caliphate to Baghdad in the 870s, the Mamluk system would have been a small-scale experiment of al-Muwaffaq, combining the efficiency as warriors with improved reliability. This recent interpretation seems to have been accepted. After the fragmentation of the Abbasid Empire, military slaves, known as either Mamluks or Ghilman, became the basis of military power throughout the Islamic world. The Fatimids of Egypt had forcibly taken Armenian, Turkic, Sudanese and Coptic Egyptian adolescents from their families in order to be trained as slave soldiers, who formed the bulk of their military and often their administration. The powerful Vizier Badr al-Jamali, for example, was a Mamluk of Armenian origin. In Iran and Iraq, the Buyids used Turkic slaves throughout their empire, such as the rebel al-Basaziri, who eventually ushered in Seljuk rule in Baghdad after attempting a failed rebellion. When the later Abbasids regained military control over Iraq, they also relied on the military slaves called Ghilman. Military slavery continued to be employed throughout the Islamic world until the 19th century. The Ottoman Empire's Devshirme, or gathering, of young slaves for the Janissary Corps, lasted until the 17th century, while Mamluk-based regimes thrived in such Ottoman provinces of the Levant and Egypt until the 19th century. Organization. Under the Mamluk Sultanate of Cairo, Mamluks were purchased while still young and were raised in the barracks of the citadel of Cairo. Because of their particular status and their austere military training, they were often trusted as their training consisted of strict military education. When the training was completed, they were discharged but remained still attached to the patron who had purchased them. Mamluks relied on the help of their patron for career advancement, and likewise the patron's reputation and power depended on his recruits. A Mamluk was also bound by a strong esprit de corps to his peers in the same household. Mamluks lived within their garrisons and mainly spent their time with each other. Their entertainments included sporting events such as archery competitions and presentations of mounted combat skills at least once a week. The intensive and rigorous training of each new recruit helps ensure continuity of Mamluk practices. Sultans had the largest number of Mamluks, but lesser emirs could have their own troops as well. Many Mamluks rose to high positions throughout the empire, including army command. At first their status remained non-hereditary and they were strictly prevented from following their father's role of life. However, over time, in places such as Egypt, the Mamluk forces became linked to existing power structures and gained significant amounts of influence on those powers' relations with other backgrounds. In Egypt, Georgian Mamluks retained their native language, were aware of the politics of the Caucasus region, received frequent visits from their parents or other relatives, and sent gifts to family members or gave money to build useful structures in their native villages in Georgia.